A fiery night, Belgorod, Bryansk, Moscow and Ryazan under drone attack, the largest raid since the beginning of the war. Along with Kyiv, Russia's border regions are plunging into a total blackout. No heat, no light. Simonyan is furious. Ukraine is crushing Russian forces in battles near Kupiansk. Putin's troops are scattering in all directions. Partisans have decisively destroyed an electric locomotive in Oryol. The Russian spring offensive failed because of Starlinks. They are finally ready for peace talks. The Ukrainian armed forces are crushing NATO during exercises. You've never seen anything like this before. The end of friendship. Azerbaijan has accused the Kremlin of deliberately attacking its embassy. Europe is preparing for nuclear war. Nuclear weapons will appear in Poland. Putin's lackeys Fico and Orban have come up with a way to bypass oil sanctions. US special forces are seizing yet another tanker from the Shadow Fleet. Sensational details about Navalny's poisoning. Putin won't be able to wriggle out of this. Russia is attacking the Olympics and Kim Jong-un has built an entire city for the widows of Koreans killed in Ukraine. My name is Katerina Nesterenko, and right now, here are the top stories. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose touch with you. Across the vastness of YouTube. Belgorod, are you asleep? Last night, drones attacked the Belgorod CHP plant. The city lost both electricity and heat.
This one here is completely out. There's absolutely no power at all. The only thing making noise are the generators. If you see any light in a window, it's from a generator. Belgorod, that's Belgorod over there. There's absolutely no power at all over there. Following
Belgorod, Bryansk also went into blackout mode. They say that the UAV hit the substation right there. Bryansk. It is reported that she was already attacked the day before, on February 8th. The drones worked so well that the governor of the Bryansk region stated that attacks of such scale had never occurred before. There were explosions enjoyed in Ryazan and even in Moscow and the surrounding region. Of course, the authorities claim that everything was shot down. After such strikes, the publics unanimously declared that their border area is unprotected and that there is trouble there.
The enemy is increasing its strike capabilities against energy facilities in Russia's border regions with each passing month. The current heating season is already coming to an end, but even towards its close, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to create temporary yet tangible problems with electricity and heating, at least in two border regions up to the pre-referendum territory of Russia. More so in Belgorod, less so in Bryansk. If nothing changes, what is the most likely scenario? Then, by the start of the next heating season, the enemy will have even more serious capabilities and reserves of strike assets to create at least local blackouts in the border areas. The Belgorod, Bryansk, Kursk and Oryol regions are most at risk.
Well, what did you expect? That's how things are moving. And now, some good news. Partisans from the ATSH movement destroyed an electric locomotive in Oryol to disrupt the logistics of the Russian armed forces in the Sumy direction. By setting it on fire, they disabled critically important equipment of a mainline freight electric locomotive. This electric locomotive will not be going anywhere anymore. The enemy's supply chain has taken another hit. While they search for a replacement locomotive, shells and equipment won't reach the front on time.
The VLO Vomits is the workhorse of the Russian railways. It's a heavy locomotive used to transport multi-ton military trains. The destroyed unit was actively used to transport equipment, ammunition and fuel from the rear to the border areas of the RSF to reinforce the troop grouping operating in the Sumy direction. We continue to systematically take out the enemy's railway transport.
Well, what can I say? This is definitely good news. If you agree, reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of you are watching us from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe and even the USA. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud that we have such reasonable viewers. Write under this episode which country you're watching us from and whether people there support our fight against the empire of evil. I always enjoy reading your comments. And for now, we continue. Up next is the most interesting part. And now to the news from the front. Ukraine has crushed Russia in the battles for Kupiansk. Russian troop losses exceeded Ukrainian losses by a ratio of 27-1. This was reported by The Times. According to the publication's sources, up to 200 Russian soldiers were surrounded before Christmas. Russia's total losses in this region over the past year number in the thousands. Some of the strongest Ukrainian units were redeployed to this direction, including soldiers from the 13th Kartia Brigade. The defense forces pushed the enemy back and raised the Ukrainian flag over the city council building. Despite massive attacks and superiority in manpower, Russia has failed to achieve significant advances on this section of the front. The General Staff reported that the defense forces struck. The concentration of enemy manpower in the temporarily occupied territories of Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk regions, and in the temporarily occupied territory of Donetsk region, a communications hub and a UAV control point were destroyed. In
the night of February 16th, in the area of the settlement of Kalynivka in the Zaporizhzhia region was struck, an area of concentration of enemy manpower. On February 15th, 2026, in the area of Novopavlivka in the Donetsk region, an enemy communications hub was struck. In the area of the settlement of Berezova in the Dnipropetrovsk region, our soldiers struck at a concentration of enemy manpower. Also in the area of the settlement of Zareshok in the Donetsk region, a UAV command post of the occupiers was hit. The enemy's losses and the extent of the inflicted damage are being clarified.
But there is also bad news. The enemy has occupied the village of Rovno in Donbass and has also advanced in Pokrovsk, Mirnohrad, and Rodinska. This is according to deep state data. I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They are holding the front and standing up to a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine, and if you can't do so financially, write them words of encouragement in the comments. I know they're watching us. UK Defence Minister John Healey stated that the Russian army is suffering losses that exceed its ability to replenish its personnel. He said this in an interview with Bloomberg on the sidelines of the Munich Security Conference.
Over the past 2 months, the Ukrainian armed forces have inflicted more losses on Russia than Moscow has been able to recruit. In some areas, the loss ratio is 25-1.
According to Healey, the Russian army is increasingly relying on foreign fighters, particularly from India, Pakistan, Nepal, Cuba, Nigeria, and Senegal. At the same time, the number of North Korean soldiers fighting on Russia's side is about 17,000 people. Let me remind you, earlier, Ukraine's Minister of Defense, Mikhailo Fedorov, announced the intention to increase Russia's monthly losses to 50,000 people by summer. Western officials believe that such losses will make it difficult for Russia to replenish its army without announcing a new wave of mobilization. All of this poses risks for Russia's dictator Putin, since the previous draft of 300,000 people in 2022 led to a mass exodus of men from the country and public discontent. What do you think? Will a new wave of mobilization be announced in Russia? And should we expect widespread discontent among Russians? Share your thoughts in the comments, I'll definitely read them. Meanwhile, the Russian spring offensive is failing before it even begins. The reason is the shutdown of Starlink. Details in our report.
At the moment, we are in urgent need of the Starlink system. Help us.
Elon Musk is thwarting the Russian offensive. Putin's spring military campaign is in serious doubt.
Thanks to Elon Musk for modern technology. It works great, very impressive.
So, the director of the Ukrainian Center for Security and Cooperation, Dmytro Zhmailo, explained. Immediately after the Starlink terminals were blocked, the Russian army quickly switched to Telegram to maintain at least some communication on the front line. But the very next day, the messenger was declared hostile, after which it stopped working as well.
Why aren't you laughing? Not funny. Didn't get it, huh? This is Russia for you.
As a result, today's Russian offensive and its broader strategic objective, by spring 2026, it's on the verge of failure. And the panic isn't being hidden, neither in the Kremlin nor even on the pro-war Z platforms, where they openly talk about what it really means for the occupiers to be left without communication.
For example, here's how a tank operates on the front line right now. There's a small Starlink installed on the tank. As of now, I know it costs 35,000 rubles. There's one on every tank. Through this Starlink, the guys working from the tank get online. On a tablet or phone, they get a live feed from a Mavic drone flying high above, and so they fire from the tank and can see in real time where their shells are landing, adjustments, elevation, direction. At the same time, via voice communication over the internet, they stay in contact with the commander. And the commander gives them instructions on where to fire, at this house, the next house, this trench, and so on. If all of this collapses, we'll be thrown back, for example, to the last century.
But the rollback is already happening. this is how our military notes that the Russians have reverted to the tactics of 2022 to 2023, back when Musk's advanced technologies were still unknown to them.
They, well, rather simply and conservatively ran internet cables and set up reinforced Wi-Fi station transmissions. These operated directly at headquarters of various levels and so on. But first and foremost, they focused on this kind of setup when it came to internet-based communications.
At the same time, it's worth noting that cables can be cut and all transmitters and antennas have to be placed on tall structures. And unlike Starlinks, they absolutely cannot be covered with anything. As a result, our drones just got some more interesting work to do.
Here we see an attack by a Ukrainian FPV drone on special equipment that the Russians installed on a power line tower. While the Ukrainian armed forces have full internet access through Starlink, the Russians don't even have this so-called alternative right now. And as soon as they tried to set up this alternative, it immediately started getting hit as well.
However, while the Russians are using Starlinks as cup holders, their command still hopes that this foreign equipment will work again. For example, in Russia, they're looking for Ukrainians who will officially register satellite dishes for money and give them a second life. Ukrainian hackers immediately responded to this.
They created numerous fake platforms, including those very Telegram bots that offered exactly this service. A drop service for adding these very terminals to the whitelist. That's how they tracked them down. As a result, first of all, they found out the numbers of the Starlinks that the Russian military wanted to sneak onto the whitelist this way. Secondly, they received almost $6,000 from the Russian military.
They got scammed. They were just blatantly deceived.
And now the deceived Russians are once again claiming that they've outsmarted the treacherous West. That's how, with great pomp, an alternative was presented. The stratospheric platform Barrage 1. Naturally, homegrown.
We don't even produce our own nails in a country that manufactures so much metal.
In short, a Wi-Fi transmitter with an amplifier is lifted into the sky on a balloon, which in theory can provide internet for up to 2 days to the areas over which the wind carries it. This is
good communication so that you can always stay connected. Now, in the age of technology, all information maps and everything else, without the internet, you can't do anything.
In reality, as reported by Le Monde, due to the loss of Starlink, Russia has significantly lost its potential on the battlefield. The accuracy of long-range strikes is steadily declining. Sometimes the occupiers don't even know that their defensive line has been breached, and losses during assaults increase with every new attempt to advance on the positions of the Ukrainian armed forces.
Now, Russian servicemen are being sent into assaults. As a matter of fact, they have no viable means to receive or process intelligence in real time. And they lack the capability to launch unmanned aerial vehicles or operate them effectively during active missions. To adjust the actions of Russian soldiers, telling them where the Ukrainian servicemen are, how best to bypass them, how to avoid running into obstacles, and so on. Now, this is no longer the case.
Notably, back in 2023, the commander-in-chief of the Russian armed forces, Gerasimov, promised to present their own satellite communication system in the shortest possible time. 3 years later, it becomes clear they should have listened to Matvienko and at least started with making their own nails.
You did this deliberately. A new conflict is brewing between Azerbaijan and the Russian Federation. The president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, publicly accused Russia of a deliberate attack on his country's embassy in Kyiv.
After the first attack, we thought it might have been an accident, and we provided our colleagues in Russia with the coordinates of Azerbaijan's diplomatic missions. After that, Russia struck 2 more times, so it was a deliberate attack.
The accusation has already received a response in Russia. There, of course, they deny everything and remind Aliyev how they expressed sympathy to the Azerbaijani ambassador in Moscow over the damage to the buildings and grounds of the Azerbaijani mission in Kyiv in November 2025. Typical. By the way, the damage in the Kremlin is not being blamed on their own attack, but, I quote, on the improper functioning of Ukrainian air defense.
The Azerbaijani side was also informed that Russian forces are striking legitimate military targets, facilities of the Ukrainian defense industrial complex, including those located in Kyiv. When planning strikes, careful monitoring of combat data is carried out to prevent harm to the civilian population. The locations of diplomatic missions of foreign states are taken into account.
In 2025 alone, at least 3 incidents of embassy buildings being damaged have been recorded. In July, a strike actually hit directly on buildings located in the area adjacent to the Azerbaijani embassy in Kyiv. At that time, there were fatalities and injuries, but not within the diplomatic mission itself. American military forces have boarded yet another substation oil tanker, the Veronica 3. It sails under the Panamanian flag and is under U.S. sanctions due to its connection with Iran. For several weeks, the tanker evaded the Americans after fleeing the blockade zone in Venezuela imposed by President Donald Trump. The Pentagon reported this, releasing a video of the vessel's capture. According to the Defense Department, American forces pursued the tanker from the Caribbean Sea to the Indian Ocean. Judging by the video, the seizure was carried out flawlessly and without incident. Commenting on the video, the U.S. Department of Defense allowed itself a bit of emotion. The vessel tried to challenge President Trump. Apparently, the oil was loaded even before the friendly visit of U.S. Special Forces to Maduro's residence, and they tried to bypass the restrictions imposed by Trump. Was the tanker confiscated? The Pentagon does not say. The Army's combat readiness ratings have crashed into reality. In the U.S., the best army in the world. Ukrainian troops decisively defeated the NATO joint forces during recent joint exercises. How did it happen? And what supports the argument that the rankings where the Russian army is supposedly second and the Ukrainian army is in the second 10 are completely inaccurate?
The Ukrainian armed forces crushed NATO troops, and not just figuratively, but literally during the large-scale Hedgehog exercises held in Estonia, where special units of the North Atlantic Alliance suffered a complete fiasco. This happened almost a year ago. However, it appears that the secrecy surrounding the results of the exercises has only now been lifted.
Ukrainian military personnel have demonstrated that NATO armies are not prepared for modern warfare. Drones, more than 16,000 military personnel from 12 alliance countries took part in the maneuvers. In one scenario, NATO units attempted to launch an offensive but were quickly destroyed.
NATO generals couldn't believe what was happening. In an instant, they lost 2 battalions of their elite soldiers along with all their heavy equipment. Nothing like this had ever happened in any previous military exercises.
They don't understand that almost everything needs to be changed.
The first surprise for NATO forces was the Ukrainian drone operators. The West knew that UAVs are currently one of the most effective weapons on the front line, but they did not expect that in the skilled hands of Ukrainian soldiers, they would prove to be so deadly.
The Ukrainian team included fighters from the unmanned systems units, bomber operators from the 412th Nemesis Brigade, and FPV crews from the 427th Rarol Brigade. Ukrainian participants in the exercises also included FPV operators from the International Legion and the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, and representatives of the Delta Situational Awareness System.
It was precisely the Delta Battle Management System which collects intelligence data in real time, analyzes it using artificial intelligence, and coordinates strikes that help the Ukrainian armed forces destroy the forces of the theoretical enemy. In addition, the Western military moved around without camouflage, set up tents and armored vehicles right out in the open, making them easy targets for drones. After that, during the exercises, the Ukrainian infantry took over.
According to the scenario, a group of 10 Ukrainian servicemen disabled 17 armored vehicles in half a day using drones. And they carried out about 30 more strikes on various targets. If this level of intensity were maintained, the notional losses in a day could reach the scale of up to 2 battalions.
It turned out that the NATO Hedgehog had lost all its spines. If these had been real combat operations and not exercises, the Ukrainian armed forces would have completely broken through the alliance's defenses in a single day. And in a day or two, they would already be at the gates of Berlin.
Our Western partners are not prepared for modern warfare. We have always said this. That's why I said that if the enemy is redeployed to another theater of operations, the situation there could develop very dramatically.
The sudden realization of this daunting prospect deeply unsettled the NATO generals.
One of the European commanders summed up what he saw after the exercises with the phrase, "We're in deep trouble."
And it seems that only the soldiers of the Ukrainian armed forces, who are now bravely fighting on the front lines against the Russian occupiers eager to seize half of Europe, are preventing this from happening.
The Ukrainian army is the strongest army in Europe. We want to express our deepest gratitude to all of our incredible heroes. We truly thank you for everything.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Our song is good, starting from the beginning. Orban and Fico are once again trying to transport Russian oil. The media reports that Hungary and Slovakia have officially appealed to the Croatian government to ensure the transportation of Russian oil via the pipeline. Adria. The corresponding joint letter to Zagreb was sent by Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó and Slovak Economy Minister Denisa Sakova.
Energy security for any country cannot be an ideological issue. Therefore, we expect that the Croatians, unlike Ukraine, will not risk the security of oil supplies to Hungary and Slovakia for political reasons.
Let me remind you, the transportation of Russian crude oil through the Druzhba pipeline via Ukraine stopped at the end of last month. The reason was large-scale Russian attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure. At the same time, Szijjártó accused Ukraine of not resuming supplies for political reasons. Well then, place your bets, ladies and gentlemen. What will Croatia's response be? A waterfall, but not of medals, of fake manipulations. That's what sets the participation of Russians in the Winter Olympic Games apart. We will tell you how propaganda clouds Russians' minds when it comes to sports.
On February 6th, in the Italian cities of Milan and Cortina, the world's main sporting event began, the Winter Olympics. On Russian TV, a whole anti-campaign was launched, claiming that the Italians had completely failed in preparing for the competition. Not like the Sochi Olympics in 2014.
Lighting the torch took 2 seconds. The venues were built almost as hastily. Tests were rushed through, barely making it in time. And then the torchbearers appeared in this chaos. Milan has been living like this for 2 days now.
On all federal channels, they started shouting in unison that most of the tickets for the Olympic opening ceremony hadn't been sold, and the event will take place with half-empty stands. The Israeli team and US Vice President Pence were booed at the opening ceremony in Milan. Italy was completely unprepared for the Olympics. In short, a whole bunch of problems.
With half-empty stands and angry jeers, the 25th Winter Olympic Games opened in Italy.
There are 2 hours left before the start of the Winter Olympic Games in Italy, but the first scandals have already erupted. Milan.
Russian reports pay special attention to corruption. The Olympics are setting anti-records. By the start of the Games, only 42% of the facilities had been completed. Some venues opened along with piles of garbage, and in some places, parts of the buildings and stands were not finished at all, and some were not completed at all. The main reason is corrupt Italian officials. On the opening day of the Games, Channel 1 did not even show the ceremony. Instead, they aired a film about the 2014 Sochi Olympics. Your hot winter. And in the news, there was a report about street riots in Milan. The 2014 Winter Olympic Games in Sochi went down in history as the most expensive sporting event ever organized, with a staggering cost of over $51 billion. By comparison, the Games in Italy cost up to 6 billion euros. For comparison, the average pension in Italy ranges from 1.5 to 2,000 euros, while in Russia it's about 260 euros. Here's an interesting fact. There were about 60,000 spectators at the San Siro Stadium in Milan. This was reported by The Guardian. But at the opening of the Sochi Olympics in 2014, there were a third fewer. And that's official information.
About 40,000 people were direct witnesses to the opening of the Games at the Fishti Stadium. These figures are provided by the Sochi 2014 Organizing Committee on the official Olympic portal.
The cherry on top when it comes to Russian propaganda's coverage of the Winter Olympics was the Ukrainian national team, to which pro-Kremlin writers and bloggers paid special attention. In
social networks like Telegram and VKontakte, claims are being spread that Kyiv allegedly planned to send to Milan 120 agents of the security service of Ukraine so that none of the members of the Ukrainian delegation would escape. It is reported that the Italian authorities supposedly forbade this. The proof is a Reuters video in English. In reality, of course, Reuters has not published anything of the sort. Similarly, a similar claim is being spread on Twitter and VKontakte, alleging that the SBU supposedly confiscated the passports of Ukrainian athletes' family members so that they would not stay in Italy after the Olympics. To prove it, a fake video from an unnamed English-language media outlet is shown. At the same time, the logo of a Russian opposition media agency's Telegram channel was used as the publication's icon.
The principle behind such fake news is very simple. A sense of credibility is created by imitating a reputable source. A fake Reuters report is being spread through Russian Telegram channels. It contains falsified statements about Ukrainian skeleton athlete Vladislav Heraskevich, who was allegedly disqualified by the IOC because of his helmet, with photos of athletes who died because of the war. The fake report claims that his brother works at the Kyiv Territorial Recruitment Center.
The Russians have launched an information campaign to discredit Ukraine and its athletes in the run-up to the 2026 Olympic Games. The goal is to discredit Ukraine on the international stage, damage the reputation of Ukrainian athletes, and spread anti-Ukrainian narratives among the global audience.
The reason for such an inadequate information policy by the federal channels is simple. Russia and Belarus have been banned from participating in the Games under their national flags because of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
We want nukes. Those aren't our words, although... Anyway, Polish President Karol Nawrocki stated that Poland should develop its own nuclear weapons.
I am a strong supporter of Poland joining the nuclear project. I mean that the path to creating Poland's nuclear capability must fully comply with all international regulations. This is the direction we should follow.
Nawrocki explains it very simply. Russia, with its imperial ambitions. However, the president of Poland doesn't know whether the discussion about nuclear weapons will go any further. After all, his country has signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Don't take this as encouragement, but the Convention on the Prohibition of Anti-Personnel Mines. Poland, together with Ukraine, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Finland, also signed it, but then they all withdrew from it together. Poland right now. And again, it's all because of Russia and its territorial appetites. Is nuclear war closer than we think? For the first time since the Cold War, Germany and France are holding secret talks about the EU's nuclear arsenal and are considering nuclear deterrence against their adversaries. But the reason for this is not only the threat from the Russian Federation, but also from the United States. What should the world expect next, and how prepared is the EU for a nuclear threat? We'll talk about this in our report.
Is nuclear war closer than we think? For the first time since the Cold War, Europe is talking about creating its own nuclear shield. The impetus was doubts about security guarantees from the United States, the so-called crisis of trust in Trump, and of course, threats from Russia. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz stated that Germany and France are holding talks on European nuclear deterrence.
We are not doing this by writing NATO off. We are doing this by creating a strong, self-sufficient European pillar within the alliance. The Chancellor said this in his speech.
But why are these discussions starting now? Is it fear of Putin or is it anxiety over Trump's inaction? According to experts, it's a combination of threats.
The European Union is now concerned about its own security, taking into account not just Donald Trump's inaction, but even his excessive hyperactivity regarding certain territories of the European Union. First and foremost, this refers to Greenland and the threats facing Denmark. This is due to the statements repeatedly made by the President of the United States. Of course, a serious argument is also needed against Russia for those countries that consider themselves hegemons in Europe. Once again, this means France and Germany. Germany is currently deprived of the ability to possess nuclear weapons on its territory. It is only deployed, and this is nuclear weaponry, of the United States. That is why Germany has started considering having its own nuclear deterrent to feel more secure without relying, let's say, on some of its allies.
As Bloomberg reports, the idea involves expanding France's nuclear umbrella, but it is still unclear whether Paris will agree to offer nuclear deterrence to other European countries. So far, there have been no proposals from Macron. In addition, the potential development of individual countries' own defense capabilities is also being considered. According to Western journalists, citing their sources, for most EU countries, replacing the American nuclear umbrella with a European one is not an option. At the very least, this is because Europe is already spending a lot of resources on building up its conventional military power. Therefore, even in Europe, it is still unclear exactly what nuclear protection will look like.
How this will work, I don't think even the Europeans themselves fully understand. As of today, among European countries that possess nuclear weapons, there are France and the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has a fairly strong retaliatory strike capability, just like France. In this case, the United States serves as an additional counterbalance on German territory. This includes the ability to use an extensive satellite reconnaissance system in low Earth orbit, along with many other advantages. If Europe loses this, then overall it will still have the capability. If we're talking about threats from the Russian Federation, it will, if necessary, have the ability to carry out a retaliatory strike against the European part of the Russian Federation.
Currently, the only true nuclear powers in Europe remain the United Kingdom and France. It is estimated that together they have about 400 warheads, whereas the United States possesses a significantly larger arsenal. France, meanwhile, maintains a full cycle of nuclear warhead production, while the United Kingdom is partially dependent on US technology and supplies. It is Paris that could play a key role in creating a new European nuclear deterrence system. Back on February 5, 2026, the Russian-American Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty officially expired. Russia and the United States are no longer restrained from engaging in a nuclear arms race. Arms control has ended, Maslov adds fuel to the fire. The deteriorating relations between Russia and the US, and Putin's desire to push the war deeper into Europe. Is nuclear war really getting closer? If you thought so too, it's too early to start buying iodine. Because as experts say, it's highly unlikely. A good example of how nuclear weapons aren't used even under the strictest doctrines is Russia's war against Ukraine.
This raises the question, what has been happening for several years now in the deep rear areas of the Russian Federation and its nearby deep rear? What's happening is that Ukraine is carrying out strikes. With drones, strike drones, long-range ones, targeting strategic sites, nuclear facilities, destroying Russian strategic aviation that is part of the nuclear triad's air wing, launching missile strikes, destroying oil refining facilities, military-industrial complex sites, and energy infrastructure. They enter Russian territory and conduct raids there, controlling hundreds of square kilometers for months. Where is the response? Where is the nuclear response? So this is yet another example that nuclear weapons are nothing more than a kind of placebo effect, which even under the strictest nuclear doctrine is practically impossible to use in a conventional war.
So the same question arises, can Europe defend itself with nuclear weapons? Against an enemy, this question also remains open.
Will France, Germany, or the United Kingdom use nuclear weapons if Russia seizes Estonia, if it invades Finland, if it starts storming the Suwalki corridor and tries to carve a path from Belarus to the Leningrad region, or from Kaliningrad to Belarus, and then moves directly towards Warsaw? In other words, will this weapon be used? Will it be used if all of this happens within the boundaries of a conventional war? I think not. And as long as Europe hasn't figured out all these circumstances, these discussions remain just talk.
If Europe really goes down the path of developing its own nuclear deterrent, this could change the balance of power in the world and call into question the existing nuclear non-proliferation system. But even under such conditions, experts do not believe that nuclear war is likely, at least in the short term.
I don't believe in nuclear war. If it could have started, it would have started a long time ago.
Discussions about a European nuclear shield are still at an early stage, but the very fact that they have emerged indicates serious changes in the global security architecture. But the fact that Europe is starting to think about its own defense is a clear signal that military action on EU territory is entirely possible. Alexei Navalny was killed. This has now been officially confirmed. Putin chose the method of murder in the best traditions of the Middle Ages. The details of the crime are in our report.
The Kremlin killed Alexei Navalny with the help of frogs. Independent laboratories from 5 different countries, after analyzing the biomaterials of the Russian opposition leader, concluded that Navalny was poisoned with a substance called epiboditin.
As for the situation regarding Mr. Navalny, yes, it is true that he has unfortunately passed away. These are always incredibly sad and tragic events for everyone involved. But we have certainly had other various cases in the past where people have died while being held in places of detention. Hasn't that ever happened in the United States?
Biden, we don't want to call you respectable. We know what you're plotting right now.
What neither the US nor former President Biden ever did was poison their political opponents with a highly toxic poison extracted from the skin of a South American poison dart frog.
Since the poisoning, the United Kingdom and its partners have been persistently seeking the truth. As a result of the efforts of Britain, Sweden and other partners, thank you, it was confirmed that a deadly toxin was found in Alexei Navalny's body. This toxin is found in Ecuadorian tree frogs.
Putin's security forces, from judges to prison guards and special service agents, first slowly destroyed Navalny's health through prison conditions, and then, exactly 2 years ago, on February 16, 2024, poisoned him with a toxin.
The data on Alexei Navalny's symptoms matches what is known about the effects of epibatidine. In the early phase, it causes a sharp increase in heart rate, blood pressure, vomiting, and seizures. Then these symptoms are quickly replaced by a drop in blood pressure, slowed heart rate, and respiratory arrest.
While Z supporters and Kremlin bots poison rational people online, the Kremlin in real life poisons opposition opinion leaders. Navalny himself, having been poisoned multiple times by Russian special services, explained why Putin resorts to poison so often.
If you shoot someone or run them over with a car, that's a traditional crime, which is more or less clear how to investigate. Here's the body, here are the bullets, here are the traces. But poisoning gives a fantastic opportunity to not conduct any investigation at all and to do the Kremlin's favorite thing. Just lie. Look, I was in a coma for 18 days and there still is not a criminal case. As if nothing happened. With a hole in your head, it's not. And here half the country still doubts and repeats it. Well, probably if they wanted to poison him, they would have. But since he's alive, it means he wasn't poisoned.
Unfortunately, people have a certain trait. Sooner or later, life ends. They die. It was reported that Navalny passed away due to natural causes.
In the case of poisoning, Putin's enemies are not bothered at all. There have been repeated failures. Western governments and intelligence agencies have exposed the Kremlin's crimes. Britain meticulously reconstructed the movements of the Skripal poisoners. In response, Simonyan recorded an interview with Russian intelligence agents about their love for spires.
The Salisbury Cathedral. It is famous not only throughout Europe, it is famous all over the world. It is renowned for its 123-meter spire. In the autumn
of 2006, the world was shocked by footage of former FSB officer Litvinenko dying in a London hospital. The opposition figure was poisoned with a radioactive substance. The court determined that Alexander was given polonium by his acquaintances, ex-FSB officer Andrei Lugovoy and businessman Dmitry Kovtun. In 2022, the businessman died from complications of the coronavirus, while the intelligence officer Lugovoy, after poisoning his comrade, received a seat in the State Duma.
Anyone who, from this moment on,
tries to harm their homeland, their country, and the citizens of the Russian Federation will lose everything and die out there, beyond our country, like a stray dog.
Several years before the murder of Alexander Litvinenko, the author of the book FSB Blows Up Russia, another prominent opposition figure was poisoned in Russia, Yuri Shchekochikhin, the investigator of the Ryazan sugar case. During Putin's first term, journalist and at the same time State Duma deputy Shchekochikhin investigated crimes and criminal connections of the Kremlin.
What is happening today is some kind of madness. Honestly, I started talking about the fact that I have 2 sons and I want to leave them a normal, clean country.
In June 2003, Shchekochikhin came to Ryazan with a commission investigating a series of explosions in Russian apartment buildings. While on this business trip, the investigative deputy suddenly fell ill. For 2 weeks, Yuri suffered a painful death in the hospital. The doctors, as they later admitted, were instructed from above to attribute his death to a rare toxic allergic necrolysis. Independent experts and even Shchekochikhin's relatives were not shown his medical records.
The fact that journalists are dying in Russia today is a sign of a sick society, and it is a sign of a sick president. Poison,
as is known, is the weapon of women, cowards, and eunuchs, as well as the Russian special services led by the KGB.
Well, now, if you're standing, you'd better sit down. Just listen carefully. In the capital of North Korea, Pyongyang, the construction of Seber Street has been completed, where the relatives of soldiers who died in the Russian war will live. Against Ukraine. The apartment certificates were personally handed out by the DPRK leader Kim Jong-un. This was reported by the North Korean news agency KCNA. According to the press release, both high-rise and low-rise residential buildings have been constructed on the street, intended to provide a happy life for the relatives of fallen soldiers. Kim Jong-un called the street the honor of a generation and a source of pride for Pyongyang, and wished the relatives of the deceased that only happiness and joy would always reign on this street. It is reported that the street was inaugurated with the cutting of a red ribbon, enthusiastic applause, cheers, ceremonial fireworks, balloons, and a shining red star. And of course, a spectacular concert. What do you think of all this surrealism? Let me know in the comments. That's all for now. Give this video a like and don't forget to subscribe to the Ukraine Today channel so you don't miss our upcoming episodes. See you next time.